Hey everyone, and welcome to Slow City Church at home, online, wherever you are today. My name is Brent, and I'm humbled to be one of the pastors here at Slow City Church. Slow City Church is a place where everyone's welcome, no matter if you are buttoned up, you're tatted up, you're uptight, you're jacked up, somewhere in between. I love saying that. This is a place where everybody's welcome, and we get to journey together, explore the ways of Jesus, help one another find and follow Jesus together. I had the joy of going this past weekend to a lake with my family to celebrate the long weekend and the day off of school for my 4 kids. On Monday, we went up to Lake Nacimiento for a couple days, a little cabin, no cell phone service, no TV, a little AC unit in the window. We had board games, we had snacks and drinks and all the things. It was amazing. And we would walk down to the lake. We had 2 kayaks, and we just got to explore the lake a little bit. There's this little island that we would go to each day, kind of off the shore. You know, the water levels are pretty low, creating these like little islands in the middle of the lake. And so we kayaked out to the middle, this middle island early in the morning so that we would like stake our claim on like this piece of property that like nobody else. This is our family. This is the 6 of us. We're going to sit out here. It was a great day, jumping off rocks and swimming and enjoying just a day of rest. I hope you got to enjoy a day of rest as well. But later in the day, one of the things we had a float that we tied a rope around, and we tied it to a chair, and every person in the family would take turns like sitting in this float. And one of my children is especially sweet, especially independent, and especially, I would like to say, stubborn in the best way. And Hattie gets on the float, and she says, "Untie the rope." Now, the rope is intended to keep the float tethered to the shore so that it doesn't drift off and get lost. But Hattie, in her independence, says, "Remove the rope." And we're like, Hattie, we're debating with her, that's not a good idea. It wasn't windy at the time, but we're like, keep the rope on. We just want to make sure you're safe. And she's like, "Detach the rope," right? And so we are like, okay, we're gonna let the rope. We're gonna let you make the choices here. And so we let the rope go. And wouldn't you know it, as Hattie is on this float, the wind picks up at Nacimiento. And you know this, but Central Coast California wind is unlike any other wind I've experienced on any other part of the globe, because it's just unrelenting. It's just constant 30 miles an hour in one direction. And this wind picks up and starts to hit Hattie and hit the float, and it starts to pull her away from the shore. And she starts to paddle as hard as she can, sitting in this float, and we're screaming at her like, "You got to jump out and you got to swim." And she's thrashing in the water, and she's not gaining any ground, but she's actually losing ground. And she starts to get frustrated, and she starts to like scream, "I can't do it. I'm stuck. I can't do it." And we all start to laugh, which makes her even more frustrated, and she starts to cry, and she is just thrashing in the water, and she's screaming for the whole lake to hear, "I can't do it. I'm stuck, and I quit." And she stops thrashing in the water, and the wind just takes her away. And it was one of those moments as a parent where I was a little frustrated, but it was a little funny, and it was a little sad, and she was frustrated, and the wind just took her away. Now, don't worry. I nearly drowned trying to swim out to rescue her and to get to her. But have you ever been in a situation in your life like that? Maybe caught in a current in the middle of your life that you couldn't really get out of. Maybe stuck in a place that you didn't want to be, or paralyzed as you've been trying so hard to overcome a behavior, overcome a pattern in your life, but you were just demoralized and defeated. I talked to a friend this past week who said plainly, "I am just stuck in this cycle of bad news, and the hits just keep on coming in my life. First, I lost a job. I have this ongoing battle with alcohol, and I got the call from the doctor with a diagnosis, and it doesn't look good, and I'm stuck." I talked to my dad this past week who said, "I'm just bored. I'm tired of watching the news and all of the bad news that comes with the news, and I'm just sitting here by myself, but I don't know what else to do. I just feel stuck." I talked to a college student who shared vulnerably, the anxiety that I am dealing with is paralyzing me. How am I supposed to handle all of this? Have you been there or in a place like it in your life where you were just caught, where you were just stuck, where you were just frozen, where the wind and the storms of life just kept on blowing? Maybe you were in a relationship where it just felt tense, or you were in this battle for your mental or emotional or physical health where you were just stuck, where you're like, I can't. I'm stuck. I'm trying, but just let the wind take me. Have you ever been at that place in your faith? Have you ever been in a stuck place in your relationship with God, your view of God? I read a few articles this past week about the state of faith in America, and one was put out by the Pew Research Group, and the article was simply entitled and simply read, "In the United States, decline of Christianity continues at a rapid pace." The Barna Group, research group, recently found that roughly 60% of Americans check the box on the census when it comes to Christianity. Yeah, I'd call myself a Christian. But of that number, only 1 in 4, they found, are practicing. Meaning, 1 in 4 of the 60% are practicing the way of Jesus, are part of a local church. Their faith drives there every day. They're engaging in prayer and all of those things. Barna Group found that the percentage of practicing Christians has nearly dropped half since the year 2000. It's kind of crazy. And culturally, we're kind of in this place where we're more spiritually aware. There are so many spiritual options, but we're more spiritually confused, and we're kind of in a stuck place spiritually. But what's causing this exodus or this stagnation of faith among us? Why are churches closing their doors every single day and people walking away from faith and following Jesus? Why is there this stuckness and maybe this I can't do this anymore kind of mentality when it comes to faith? Why? Maybe it's due to some self-inflicted wounds that many of us have experienced, some self-destructive behavior. Maybe we've made too many mistakes in our life and there's some shame and guilt, and we've convinced ourselves that we're just too far gone and we're too far out on the lake and the wind is too hard and it's just easier just to slide into complacency. Maybe it's because we as a culture are more distracted now than ever, and we can get caught up in all the shiny new things of life. And maybe it's due to all the cultural currents and trends and philosophies that seem to blow against what faith teaches and seems to be at odds with faith. Or maybe the church hasn't been a safe place for questions, hasn't been a safe place to wrestle. Now, we want to be that place, by the way. Maybe it's because of some of the bad religion that we've seen people formed in. We've been discipled in or formed by, or because we've seen or know firsthand some of the spiritual abuse that many have experienced. Maybe that's why people are losing faith or walking away from faith or just feel stuck or stagnant in this faith. Just this past week, a report came out about the Southern Baptist Convention covering up many issues of sexual abuse in the church. Why are we acknowledging that? It needs acknowledging. Because what are we doing in the church if we're covering up abuses for like a PR game? Like, we've seen so many church leaders culturally grasp for celebrity and riches and influence, fall and leave real people reeling and wounded. Maybe people are walking away from faith because they see the hypocrisy. Maybe it's because today it seems that we can, and we should, culturally, this is what's taught to us, like just pick and choose from the spiritual buffet of your choosing. Pick and choose what you want. Pick and choose. Like, maybe I'll take some of the teachings of Buddha, and I'll take some Brene Brown, and I'll take some outdoors. I'll take some of the great outdoors. I'll take some yoga. I'll listen to the new Killers album and get to that place, and I'll add a splash of activism or nationalism, whatever side you lean, and then I'll wash it down with Jesus, and I'll just get all of the things. And all of this blended together, some of the church hurt and the church abuse and the church drama and all of the spiritual buffet and all the self-destructive behavior and all the patterns and things and pulls, all of this leaves us in this mess that is not Jesus and leaves us individually and culturally stagnant and spiritually often stuck, feeling less than healthy, less than whole when it comes to how we come to know God and grow in God and know ourselves in light of God and walk with God. And we read 1 Thessalonians 5:23. We've read it every week. We read it when we say, we read, may God himself, the God who makes everything holy and whole, make you holy and whole and put you together spirit, soul, and body. And we read that and we think, I want that. I want my spirit. I want my soul. I want my whole being to be put back together by God. I want to connect with God, but I just feel like I'm in this weird place where I've tried everything and I've seen everything and I'm just kind of like, I can't. I'm stuck. And just let the wind blow me wherever it goes. What do I do when I'm at that place? Today I want to wrap up this health series by looking at an interaction with Jesus and someone who was in that place, stuck, stagnant, and desperate. And I'm going to challenge us, encourage us to see Jesus' care and intentionality in this interaction. And I want us to notice a question Jesus asks, and then we're going to wrestle with this together. Okay, here's the scene. John chapter 5 is where we're going to be if you want to follow along. It says this: Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now, there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here at this pool, a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. Here's the scene. Jesus is entering into Jerusalem, which was the big city, the religious center of Israel, and the temple was there. There were religious folks there, people of influence and clout, probably great places to eat and things to see. Jesus could have gone to any place that he wanted to in Jerusalem. There were probably a lot of people that wanted to see Jesus, probably a lot of people of influence that Jesus could have interacted with. But Jesus goes to a place where a great number of people are laying by a pool, by a well. Another translation calls a great number a multitude of really broken people, blind people, lame people, sick people, paralyzed people, unwell people are laying right here by this well that was called Bethesda. Why? Well, they were laying there because there was this belief or this superstition that from time to time an angel or a spirit would come down and stir up the waters. And there was this belief that if you were sick, if you were unwell, if you were lame, that when the angel or the spirit came down and stirred up the waters, made this ripple in the water, this bubbling in the water, that the first person in the water to wade through the water would be healed. And so for years, year after year after year, multitudes of the broken, of the hurting, of the forgotten would fight each other to get into the water first. And Jesus chooses to go to this place. Now, real quick, what gets a person in a place like this? What gets an unwell person in a place by this well, believing this thing about this water that could possibly, what gets a person here? What gets multitudes of purpose at this well with this false hope? Why are there people waiting for water to move? Why are these people so desperate, and what keeps them there? Maybe they've tried everything in their life. Maybe they've tried the doctor. Maybe they've gone to different people, and this was their last resort. Maybe they'd gone to church and they try and bring their real ailments and their burdens to God, but were turned away because their ailment was too messy, or they were too messy, or they ran into people. They probably did in this time. They ran into people who told them that God wasn't concerned about them and their condition, and they were probably the reason for their affliction. There was a belief around that time that like your ailment was probably a result of your wrongdoing or your sin or your father and mother's sin. And so here they were, discarded by the people of God, discarded and forgotten about their family, doing whatever they could do that might make them get better, that maybe could help them feel better, that maybe could help them walk again. And they are hopelessly waiting by this pool called Bethesda. We call hospitals now. There's a Bethesda hospital. What does Bethesda mean? It means house of mercy or flowing waters. And there would be people there just waiting for years and years and years to get better. All there because of maybe religious neglect or abuse, spiritual abuse, a wrong view of God, a wrong view of themselves. Now get this. Again, Jesus goes there. Could have gone anywhere. Jesus goes to this place, to a messy and desperate place filled with messy and desperate people. People stuck, people troubled, people paralyzed, people hurting, people swept away from faith and from family and from friends and from hope. He walks into that place. And hear me, he still walks into those places today. And in the midst of the sea of people, there's one person that catches Jesus' eye. Look at verse 5. One who was there had been an invalid, or he had been sick, for 38 years. One man in the mass of brokenness and the multitudes of hurting people had been paralyzed, had been ill for 38 years. 38 years of experiencing this affliction, 38 years of experiencing this stuckness, and he is lying on a mat, alone and hopeless. Look at verse 6. When Jesus saw him laying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" I just want to break this down for a little bit. Jesus walks into a desperate place filled with desperate people because he has a divine appointment with one person. There is one man. There is one man who has been lying in that one place for many, 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 many years, waiting for maybe the chance to crawl into the waters. And Jesus sees this one man who has experienced his affliction for decades. Get this. Jesus saw him. And then, what's it say? And then he learned about this man. He inquired, was concerned for, and asked about this man. And then Jesus spoke to him and asked him a question. Don't miss the power in this little verse. Verse 6. Don't miss the power in this line. A man for 38 years is stuck in this condition, and Jesus sees him. Jesus sees him. Don't miss that power. We see this all throughout the Gospels. Jesus saw him. Man, sometimes acknowledging someone's existence is the most powerful gift you can give to someone. Sometimes acknowledging that someone exists is the greatest act of healing and hope that you can give some people. We live in a world right now that looks past and beyond real people. May we see the power that we see in Jesus, that he sees and acknowledged the often overlooked. And so should we. We should be that kind of a church. Jesus saw him. And then Jesus learned about him. He asked questions about his condition. He took an interest in this throwaway's life. He was concerned about the disregarded. I got the chance, and we shared this a little bit last week, but I got the chance to talk on the phone with a man who actually hears our outdoor services from his back porch, but he can't make it here. Our church got to buy this elderly gentleman tires, and I got to spend some time on the phone with him, and I just asked about his story. I said, tell me your story and tell me what you've been walking through. And I got to learn about his difficulty, and you could just hear the gratitude in his voice that some little collection of people that gathers on a parking lot that he hears singing every Sunday cared enough to ask about him, to learn about his condition. It brought value and dignity to this person. See, Jesus sees and acknowledges the existence of a man in a massive brokenness amongst a sea, a multitude of blind, paralyzed, hurting people. Jesus sees and acknowledges him, and then he learns about this man. And then Jesus gets down on his level. He looks him in the eyes. He's lying on his mat, and there's this divine appointment in a desperate place. Then Jesus asks him a difficult question. Here's the question. Do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? Jesus asks. Now, why is this a difficult question? Why am I calling this a difficult question? At first glance, this question seems a little obvious, right? Maybe even a little insensitive. Jesus, the dude's laying on a mat. He's been laying on a mat for 38 years. He's clearly here for a reason. He's waiting by this superstitious pool, waiting for some spirit or some angel to come flap their wings and move the waters that maybe he can crawl and jump in. I think he wants to get better. Yeah, I think he wants to get well. Why are you even asking that? But the more I sit with this story, and the more I hear that question asked of the man and even asked of myself, the more I've been chewing on this week. I want to just really sit with this question for the rest of our time together. Because this question is not asked flippantly. Jesus was very intentional about this question, and it is a difficult question to ask and a difficult question to answer. Do you want to get well? That question often reveals that sometimes in our life when we are stuck or we are stagnant or we feel like we're being pulled out to sea, there's often this response in us of like, if I'm honest, if we're honest, if you're honest with yourself, I don't really even care. Do you want to get well? If I'm honest, I really don't care anymore. And that question reveals that we are often feel hopeless or we've given up hope. If we're really honest, there are seasons in our lives that we just didn't care. At the core of who we are and that what we're stuck in, we have gotten to a place where we're just like, I know that I've gotten caught up in this self-destructive pattern, the self-destructive ways of thinking about myself and others, but man, I don't care. I know I've been drinking too much and now I need the drink to get to sleep, but I don't care. I know that my marriage is in a stuck place and it's tense, but to change anything, it's going to take some work and it's going to take some apologies and it's going to take some patience and I don't care. I'll just watch this show. I know the depression is killing me, but I've honestly been to 12 therapists and I'm on medication and nothing seems to work and I just don't care anymore. I know that my faith is non-existent, but I'm not doing anything about it. I'm not talking to anyone. I'm not praying. I'm not serving. I'm not engaging. Because you know what? I just don't care anymore. I think sometimes when we are asked that question, do you want to get well? If we are really honest, it's easier for us just to stay unwell and to stay stuck right where we are. So do I want to get well? It's hopeless. I don't know. That's a difficult question. Because to find health and healing and hope and growth and all the things needed to get better, I'd have to acknowledge where I'm at. And that's annoying and that's painful. See, Jesus asked a very intentional question. Do you want to get well? Notice the man's response in verse 7. He says, Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Do you want to get well? And his response is, yeah, there's no one to help me get into the pool. I'm trying to get to the water, but I can't get to the water. Do you want to get well is a difficult question because it often exposes the wells that we keep going to, the wells we keep sitting by and waiting by in hopes to get well that will never actually make us well. His response, he says, I can't get to the water. But this man, year after year after year is missing what could make him better because he's putting his hope in the wrong well. I know I share stories about my dad, probably way too much, but there are so many stories with my dad and about my dad in the treasury box that I can't not share them. And so a few years ago, my dad called me and he said, Brent, I got this weird rash all over my body that I've had for weeks, and I've got to fix this. And always a fun conversation to have with your parents as they are aging. And I said, well, Dad, have you seen someone about the rash? And he goes, yeah, I was down at Kenneth's Corner, the neighborhood bar, and I showed it to Dean and Andy, and they're pretty sure it's a heat rash. So I picked up some cream, and I'm sure it'll be cleared up soon. And I said, Dad, let me get this straight. You've had a rash for a month, and it's all over your body, and you went to the bar, and you asked your friends for help. Now, a year later, we would find out that alcohol actually worsens eczema, which is actually what my dad was experiencing. And my dad, whom I love, was going to a place and asking some people for help that was actually making it worse. And now I love my dad. I love him. And he is generous in letting me share some of these stories. But he was going to the wrong well to get well. See, Jesus' question, do you want to get well, revealed the same thing to this man who was laying by the pool. Reveals the same thing of us, that this hope, that what we're going to, we're hoping in a well that will not make him well. And it's been 38 years where he's been lying on the same old mat by the same old well, waiting for the same old results, and he would get the same old results. And I think this hits home for some of us. Man, I keep going back to such and such. I keep going back to Phil, that person, thinking he or she or it will fix all of this pain and make me well. But I keep getting the same old results. I keep texting them. I keep running after all these accomplishments and bigger accounts to make me feel better and to make me well. I keep going to anger and bitterness and resentment and the ways of revenge to get them back. I keep thinking that I can keep sitting here doing nothing and expect a different result and expect to get well. I keep going to the well of I can do it all myself. I don't need God, grace, and any of that church garbage. And the difficult truth is, in this very intentional question that Jesus asks, it reveals that some of us have found ourselves sitting at wells, trying to get well, but those wells will never make us well. Jesus asks, do you want to get well? What wells have you been sitting by that are the wrong wells to be sitting by, that have never made you well, that will never make you well? It's a difficult question that Jesus asks. Look what else the man says. He says, there is no one. He says, I have no one to help me. I have no one to pick me up and to carry me to the place that I want to go. There is no one in my life. This question reveals his condition, that he is sitting by a well that will never make him well, that he has kind of given up all hope and all hope has been lost. And then he ultimately says, there is no one in my life that cares for me. No one in my life that sees me. There is no one who will help me. We talked about this often, but this is a heartbreaking reality in this man's life 2,000 years ago, and it's a heartbreaking reality in many people's lives today, in the world today. So many of us are busy, but really, honestly, lonely. So many of us are really connected to all the events and all the news and all the information happening around the world today, but there's really no one who knows us and who is with us. We're so driven and so ambitious and so connected and so anxious and so exhausted. And if we're real, there's really no one who sees us and sits with us and cares to ask about us and learn about us, and no one to help. No one but Jesus. No one but Jesus. See, Jesus goes to a desperate place, to messy and desperate people, because he has this divine appointment with one man who he asks a difficult question of. And that question reveals this person is at a well that won't make him well, with no hope and no one who cares about him. No one but Jesus. Because Jesus has this interaction that will ultimately be a defining moment in this man's life who has been stuck and stagnant and paralyzed for far too long. Look at what Jesus does. Jesus sits with him. He talks with him. He looks him in the eyes and he says, then Jesus said to him, verse 8, get up, pick up your mat and walk. And at once, the man was cured of his ailment. He picked up his mat and he walked. See, Jesus leans in to this man's circumstance and he says, look at me. Listen to my voice. I am here with you. There may be no one to help you get to the well that you think you need to get well that won't make you well, but I am here. I want you to look at me. I am here with you. I see you. I care about you. I've come to this place for this purpose, to meet with you. And he says, listen to me. Stand up. Pick up the rug you've been laying on for far too long and walk out of this place. Get away from this well. Walk with me, and I have life for you. I love what Jesus says in John chapter 4. He says, whoever drinks the water that I give them will never thirst again. The water I give them will become in them like a spring of water, welling up to eternal life. And Jesus says, listen, stand up, pick up your mat, walk away from this well. I'm going to create a well within you that you can trust me and you can walk with me. And something incredible happens. The man who had been stuck actually stands on his own 2 feet. He gets up, he picks up his mat, and he begins to walk out of the stuck place. He is whole, he is healed, he is hope-filled, and his faith is restored. Why? Because he finally made it to the water? No. Because he saw Jesus. He looked into Jesus' eyes and he heard his voice and he responded to his invitation to stand up, to pick up his mat, and to walk. Man, I've really loved walking through this series together. I don't know your experience with the church. I don't know your experience with church people or church things, but it's been my prayer and our prayer that you have seen the heart and the compassion and the grace and the truth and the ways of Jesus as we walk through some important areas of life and faith through this health series. And it's my prayer that you see in every conversation that Jesus sees you. It's my prayer that you see in everything that Jesus sees you, that Jesus cares for you, that Jesus graciously asks each of us a question that we have to wrestle with. Do you want to get well? Do you want to get well, or do you want to stay sitting right where you're sitting for the rest of your life? Do you want to get well, or do you just want to keep going back to the same old wells who keep yielding the same results? Do you want to get well? Maybe you've been up against anxiety, depression, and all the emotions. May you see today that Jesus is one who says, it's okay to not be okay, but would you look at me? Would you listen to my voice? Would you stand up? And would you walk with me out of this place? I'll walk with you through it. Maybe you've been in a storm of relational unhealth and toxic friendships that have left you wounded, hurting, and just really stuck in a bad place. May you see that Jesus steps into our mess and he says, look at me, listen to my voice, stand up. I can put you back together. I can lead you in the ways of grace and mercy and forgiveness. Would you stand up and would you walk with me through this? Would you follow me through this? Maybe you found yourself consumed with work and financial goals and expectations and all the ambition, but you just found yourself empty. I pray that you see that Jesus says to you, look at me. Let some of that stuff go. Trust me that I'm a good provider and I'm a good sustainer and my ways are higher and better. Would you stand up and would you walk with me? Would you follow me? Maybe you've run into some self-destructive behavior, some self-inflicted wounds. Maybe you've experienced the spiritual buffet of 2022. Maybe you've really seen the church abuse and neglect and church wounds. You've walked through it. You've experienced it yourself. And if that's you, I have to say, I'm sorry. We will not be that church. We desire to lead like in the way of Jesus and the way of health. And it's not supposed to be that way. But if you felt stuck in your faith, stagnant, and you're not sure where to go, can I encourage you to look at Jesus, to hear his voice saying, look at me, listen to my voice, stand up, pick up that mat that you've been laying on for far too long, and would you follow me? We follow a Savior who comes to desperate places to meet with desperate people. He sets up divine appointments where he asks us difficult questions so that we can have a defining moment where we don't have to just be tossed by the wind and by the storms of life, but we can actually be rescued by the goodness and the grace of God. See, Jesus steps onto the planet and he steps into our brokenness and he says, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to stay this way. Let me right the ship. Let me put you back together. Let me lead you in health. Let me make you whole. Do you want to get well? Do you trust Jesus? Do you trust that Jesus is the one who can make you well? Maybe you pray this prayer with me today. Jesus, we trust you. Take whatever condition we are in, whatever we've walked through, whatever we're stuck in, whatever we feel paralyzed in. And Jesus, we trust you with these things. We lay them down at your feet. We receive your mercy and your grace and your forgiveness. We look at the cross, Jesus, and we see that our shame and our guilt and the worst of our sin and the worst of humanity was dealt with on the cross. And help us to look into your eyes, to hear your voice, to listen to your voice, to stand up, to pick up our mat, and to follow after you. Make us healthy. Make us whole. Put us back together, spirit, soul, mind, body, as we trust you with every part of our lives. We love you. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.